Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining our Friday weekly lunch and learn. Every Friday at noon, Sierra Club Iowa chapter goes live to give you an important update on an environmental topic. And we have a big one for you. It's the Triennial review with the DNR, and this has to do with water quality. If you watched a few weeks ago, we did a lunch and learn to just talk about what this process is and that there are 2 public comment periods and that we would be following up. And well, we attended those 2 public comment periods where the DNR gave presentations. And now we have an update for you. This is what we learned, and this is what we are going to be submitting to the DNR as our comments. And we want to help make sure that you are prepared to share your comments as well. So with that, we'll share our screen, and I am going to start going through the triennial review. So just a real quick overview is that every 3 years, states are all required to hold a public hearing for the purpose of reviewing their water quality standards. So basically, what are our standards for considering whether water is polluted or not, and how do we determine it, all of that kind of stuff. And this provides an opportunity for the public to participate in the state's water quality standards adoption process. It's called the Triennial Review, and we do it through the Iowa DNR. On the next slide, you'll see that there are a bunch of topics or areas that they review during this triennial review. We're going to dig into a few of those that we have some significant comments on, but you can read our full comments with a link that we'll provide later on. But the topic reviews for the triennial review are rights reserved for tribal nations, anti-degradation, human health criteria, Chapter 61, which is the surface water classification document and how to clean that up, use attainability analysis, which is sometimes known as UAA, PFAS, and lake nutrients. So first one we're going to dig into is human health criteria. These are federal regulations that are designed to maintain and protect high quality waters and existing water quality in other waters from unnecessary pollution. So we're talking about levels of different pollutants that could be carcinogenic or not carcinogenic, and making sure that we are saying, this is the maximum level it can be before it's considered unsafe. Some of the examples of the pollutants that have standards under the human health criteria are aluminum, arsenic, asbestos, atrazine, barium, cadmium, carbon tetrachloride, copper, cyanide, DDT, diquat, glyphosate, thallium, and many, many more. And right now in Iowa, the human health criteria standards that we operate under are EPA's 2002 criteria. So as you can imagine, that's pretty out of date. So we are supporting to implement EPA's 2015 human health criteria. So updating that from the 2002 criteria to the 2015 criteria. And that's important because we learn a lot more about these different pollutants and how they impact our bodies and our health. And we need to have the most up-to-date standards to make sure that our water is not causing health problems, which we know it is because we have huge cancer rates here in the state. On the next slide, we're going to talk about use attainability analysis, or UAA. The use attainability analysis is a process of gathering field data and assessing available information to determine the appropriate designated uses for a stream or river. So basically they're trying to say, what should the water quality standards be for this lake or this stream or this river are based upon how it's used. Is this one that people swim in a lot? Is this a water source where people are getting drinking water or where they are fishing and eating out of the river or the stream? The UAA, or use attainability analysis, confirms whether a water body can support presumed high-level uses like swimming or healthy aquatic life, or if its actual capabilities warrant a different lower level use. So they have to put every river or stream into a category so then they can say, well, this is how we're going to determine if it's polluted or not. Here are some of the categories. Recreation. And I'm not going to read through all of these, but you can kind of see based on how a river or stream is used, it can be given a different classification. But for example, class A1 is primary contact recreational use. The water's recreation use involves full body immersion with prolonged and direct contact with the water, such as swimming or water skiing. And then you have like minimal contact, or you have things that might include like little wade pools at parks. And those all have different classifications because then they all have to have different standards to consider whether they're polluted or not. Another example of a UAA is aquatic life uses. And you can see there's quite a few of them. This is different types are warm water or cold water. So you'll notice like class B, WW1, WW is warm water. And you'll see about halfway down the screen, there's class B, C, W1 is cold water. And just basically what is this body of water used for in terms of aquatic life? So that first one is typically large interior and border rivers and the lower segments of medium-sized tributary streams capable of supporting and maintaining a wide variety of aquatic life, including game fish. So you can read through those, hit pause on this later on, and you can go through each of those classifications and kind of see how the DNR splits up those water bodies. Another one of the categories for UAAs are drinking water, and that's obviously a really important one. They're called Class C, and these are waters which are raw water sources of a potable water supply. There are a couple other uses. HH, Class HH is waters in which fish are routinely harvested for human consumption. So those need to have, special standards if we know people are eating the fish from the water body. And then there's also a category called outstanding Iowa water bodies. That's a surface water that DNR has classified as an outstanding state resource and has very special standards to maintain that. So you can see every type of water needs to have a use, so then we can say whether or not the levels in the water of pollutants meet that use or if it's polluted. When we looked through what the DNR presented for the use attainability analysis, we support completing all of the outstanding UAAs. Obviously, every body of water in Iowa should have a UAA, so then we can set standards for it and then monitor those standards and make sure those standards are met. So we want them to complete the ones that are outstanding, which includes the 100 that are in the process and an additional 150 that haven't even been started yet. So how can we judge if water is polluted or not if we have not even decided, what the standard should be for that water? The presentation that the DNR gave indicated that there are about 250 NPDES permit renewals that are delayed because UAAs need to be completed. So NPDES permits are National Pollution Discharge Elimination permits. And basically any facility that's polluting into the water of the US has to have this permit. So that way we can make sure, they're not exceeding the levels that they're allowed to discharge. Well, we can't even issue those permits if we don't even have these UAAs completed. And so not completing these UAAs slows down the whole rest of the process. Some of those NPDES permits that are delayed and haven't been completed go back over 18 years since 2007. So the DNR needs to forcefully tell the governor and the legislature that DNR needs the resources, the money, the staff, the equipment to complete all of these UAAs. The next thing we're going to dig into for the triennial review is PFAS. And I'm sure that you have heard a lot about this over the last couple of years. These are human-made chemicals, also known as forever chemicals, because they persist indefinitely in the environment and in our bodies. They're considered bad because they accumulate in the environment, contaminate drinking water, and have been linked to various serious health issues, including increased cholesterol, decreased immune response, thyroid and liver problems, and several types of cancer. So we, in terms of what the DNR is proposing, we support the DNR implementing EPA's 2024 human health criteria for aquatic life for PFOA and PFAS, and the benchmarks for 8 other PFAS chemicals as part of Iowa's water quality standards. So we want to start implementing some of the criteria that are coming out of the federal government because this is still so new that we don't have some of those in place. So that's what we support in terms of the triennial review for PFAS. And then we have lake nutrients. Lake nutrients are what we're talking about, mostly NNP, nitrogen and phosphorus, especially phosphorus, because we know that that is causing algal blooms and pollution of our lakes. The Sierra Club supports the DNR setting numeric standards for lakes, including for nitrates, phosphorus, chlorophyll, and SECI depth. Although the Triennial review concentrated on lake nutrients, nutrient issues are significantly affecting rivers and streams as well. So the DNR needs to establish numeric standards for nitrates, nitrites, and phosphorus for rivers and streams as well. In 2023, the Iowa legislature zeroed the state funding for our sensor network that's operated by the University of Iowa. These are water sensors all across the state monitoring the level of pollutants in our water. After that funding was lost, a funder stepped in to cover that network through 2025, and that funding is going to be ending in 2026 unless legislature restores it. If the legislature does not restore that funding, our network of 80 sensors all across the state will be reduced to 20 sensors. And without those sensors, we do not know the levels of nutrients in our water bodies. So it is critical that we are funding our water sensor network. Some other issues that we highlighted in our comments are expired NPDES permits. We talked about these a little bit ago. These are the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System permits that are required under the Federal Clean Water Act. And we are significantly behind on doing that. A review of the DNR's NPDES permit listing spreadsheet shows that there are 1,587 permits as of just a couple days ago this year. Of those, 451 have expired on or before August 31st. 22 were scheduled to expire on September 30th of this year, and the oldest one expired in 2002, over 2 decades ago. And setting water quality standards is so critical, so that way we can get to these NPDES permits and start cleaning up our water. We do not have the capacity to do what is necessary right now to clean up the water because we are an underfunded agency. DNR is an underfunded agency. Another thing that we commented on is a thing called TMDL, and that is something that's called Total Maximum Daily Load. And DNR uses a ton of different acronyms, so it makes it really hard to sometimes follow along. So hopefully explaining all of this makes it a little bit easier to understand. But a TMDL is a calculation that determines the maximum amount of a specific pollutant a water body can tolerate and still meet safe water standards. So they're saying this river cannot have more than this pollutant, otherwise it's classified as impaired or polluted. Every water that's on Iowa's impaired water list requires a TMDL. In order to clean it up, you have to put what are the limits of this water body, and then how do we enforce that? And then how do we issue permits to the facilities, these NPDES permits, how do we issue facilities that are polluting into that water to make sure we're keeping those daily loads down under the level? So all impaired waters require TMDL. The DNR writes these TMDLs in order to remove waters from the impaired water list. But the problem is, just because you have a TMDL, a limit of how much pollutants can be in a water, that doesn't mean you've cleaned up the water. You have to actually implement it and enforce it. And that's what's the problem with the DNR right now is we're writing the plan so that way we can remove them from the impaired waters list, but we're not actually enforcing them. And then overall, big common theme is funding. The Iowa DNR needs adequate funding and staffing to implement water quality standards and cleanup plans. That's very obvious, and the DNR suffered from budget cuts for many, many years. So back to this whole process. This is a long process. They held 2 hearings, which we attended, and many of you did as well. So thank you very much for attending those hearings and speaking up. But now the DNR is accepting written comments, and these written comments are going to be accepted through October 20th at 4:30 p.m. You can submit those comments via email, or you can send them in the mail. And you can see the email and the address on the screen here. We're going to make it really easy for you. We are going to provide talking points next week via email, and it'll be easy where you can just click here to submit your comment to the DNR, or you can write your own. But we want to make this as easy as possible, and we'll have sample text and everything. The other thing you can do, if this is really important to you and you want to write some very specific comments, we will share our actual full comments with you, and that might give you some ideas. So however you want to do it, you can even just submit comments that say we support the Sierra Club comments. But the most important thing is that we all weigh in and we make sure the DNR knows that we expect to have good standards, because that's what's going to start us in the direction of cleaning up our water. We can have standards and we can say that we are not meeting those standards and how we are going to fix that. So thank you everyone for listening. I will post the link to the full comments in the chat. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us via email. And we hope you have a great day. Thank you, and we'll see you next Friday at noon.